My name is Beth Wilson. I was with you all back in July, I think, talking about worm bin. So I enjoy doing this, but I will say that you caught me in fall break. And when I signed up for this, I totally forgot about fall break. So I'm at home and there's dogs potentially in the background. So I'm really sorry about that. Hopefully nothing will happen. But yeah, this is keeping yourself in berries all year. It's not going to be anything mind shattering like Sharon's alluding to. I don't think it is anyway. It's just going to be talking about what berries we can grow and how to kind of get them timed right, or knowing the timing of them. So I'm not going to talk about like grapes, but I'll show you here what I'm going to talk about. Right, here we go. We're going to talk about these in succession. Mainly the thing to take away about it is we do have some very early blooming fruit that could potentially get hurt by frost. But there's some fruit that we have that we never have a problem with frost. As you can see on the right picture over there, that's a strawberry, upper right. That's a strawberry that's with a black center. That's not going to make a strawberry this year. And then on the bottom, blueberries, generally we can get away without frost protection, but sometimes we get these little frost rings around them. They're perfectly edible. They just look kind of bad. But serviceberry, strawberries, and blueberries are the main ones that we have problems with frost. But by all means, plant them. They are so good. All right, now I consulted with Dr. John Strang on this slide that I kind of put together about the timing. So our earliest fruit that we get in Kentucky is going to be our June bearing strawberries, maybe our ever bearing strawberries. It kind of depends. But you can see that June bears just have a very short window up here. I hope you can see my cursor. Just in May and through June, it starts getting way too hot and they get pretty lousy, really. The ever bearing strawberries, I have never grown these, but I am growing them this year and next year. So I'm going to have a whole better understanding of these things. But from what I've been told, they come in kind of blotches. They come in these 3 harvest windows. I'm personally am not seeing that this year on mine, but I'll talk a little bit about that later. But UK does not recommend growing these. But in my mind, if you like strawberries and you want some throughout the year, you need to be growing some. Serviceberry has a very short window here in May, late May into June. They call them June berries for a reason. They're usually in June. Then we get into our black raspberries, which are so yummy. If you've never tried these, you've got to grow some of these and try them. But they have a pretty narrow window too. I think it's fairly narrow. Mine usually come in June and no other month. By July, I'm out of them, but it's probably my variety selection, to be quite honest. And then if you like gooseberries, I'm not a fan, but there's gooseberries coming in June and July. And then of course we have blueberries with a pretty long season from June through August. We got blackberries that have a really long season now with the advent of these fall bearing or primocane fruiting blackberries. We can basically have blackberries and raspberries from June until frost. Okay, it's really wonderful if you like those 2 fruit anyway. All right, that was a whole bunch of information in one little slide, but we'll just keep on going. All right, so let's talk about strawberries. They're the first one to come in. If you want to have berries for as long during the season as possible in that very short window from May to June, you need to have different varieties that come in at different times. And you can see some of the recommendations there for varieties on our early, mid, and late. Early glow by far beats everybody as far as taste. I'm all about taste. I'm not going to grow something that tastes gross. So I will tell you, these are the June bearings. So, you know, you might hear about these plasticulture berries like Sweet Charlie and Camarosa and even Chandler, which is kind of the standard for a long time. You know, if you don't put those on plastic, I don't really know what to tell you what's going to happen with them, to be quite honest. I've never tried them. They are bred for plasticulture. They don't have very good disease resistance. So I probably would stick with some that have some disease resistance. But I tell you, I think this is Camarosa here on the right. It's wonderful. Flavorfest is wonderful, but mainly bred for plasticulture. So just keep that in mind. And it is good. I just talked about disease resistance. There's some really good reasons to grow some of these because you have all these R's here. All the R's mean they're resistant to all these things. So that's a very, very good thing to have built into the plant. And this is just the season, how late it is compared to early glow, which comes in first. So that would be a 0. So, Flavorfest would be 3 days later. All-Star would be 9 days later. And the AC Valley Sunset would be 2 weeks later. So that's all that means. But look at your disease package on these varieties and be sure to spread, try to spread out that harvest as much as you can. That way you're going to be in berries for as long as possible. And that's why I'm talking about this today. All right, so let's talk about these weird everbearing varieties. And if any of you all have some experience, good or bad, with these, at the end we can talk about it. As I said, there's usually, according to UK and other people that know more about this than I do, there's usually these 3 production peaks in the spring, summer, and fall. Here are some of the varieties that'll get you berries even in the summertime. I'll make you jealous. Can you see these? Whoops, maybe you can't. There we go. I just picked these yesterday and they are yummy. I'm getting more than that for 5 plants that I planted. But what I'm doing is I'm taking these last 4 right here, Seascape, Albion, San Andreas, and EV2, and kind of comparing them. And I'll just tell you right now, Seascape, get Seascape. San Andreas just doesn't taste very good. It does have some large fruit, but it just doesn't taste good to me. Albion has held its size really nicely, and it's good tasting, but it's a little firm. And then, like I said, Seascape is just it kind of keeps its size pretty good, and it just by far the best tasting of these 4 that I have found. I'm growing them both in a raised bed and in a straw bale, and I'll tell you, forget the straw bale. If you got room, put them in the ground. Hands down, was the best. And I don't think this is in the slides because I just stuck this in here yesterday because in my mind, coverage of the ground is pretty important. Otherwise, you're going to have a weed fest, right? So these were planted up here in the upper left-hand corner. You can see this is the configuration they were planted in, about 12 inches on center. So like my plant would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. But this is the coverage that I got in July and then again in August. And again, you can just tell that EV2 is kind of struggling with, oops, where's my cursor? There it is. EV2 has been struggling all year with coverage, so I'm having to weed a whole lot more. Same thing with San Andreas. San Andreas just now is starting to really start covering good. But by far, again, Seascape right here has really covered the bed really, really good. And even Albion has really covered the bed pretty good. By this time of the year, you don't have a September or even an October picture, but the Albion and Seascape are completely covered. If a weed wanted to get through, it'd be really hard. And so that's, to me, that's important because just weed issues. The other thing I'll tell you, and I'm sorry to go on about strawberries because they're fresh in my mind since I'm doing this, but Seascape and Albion hold their berries up, and as the weight of the berry comes on, they'll slowly drop. But Evie and San Andreas are right on the ground, and so they're a lot more prone to fruit rot. I'm going to stop talking about these now, unless I have another slide. But Seascape. Just some uses of strawberries in your landscape beds or in a raised bed. To me, this one on the left is a nightmare. You'll never keep them in bounds. They're going to keep trying to crawl back this way, but it does make a very good ground cover. Strawberries really can. Again, give them a big space. They will cover it up. You will have berries, berries, berries. I'm not a fan of strawberries in containers, but this looks pretty, doesn't it? And I'm definitely not a fan of this or straw bales. The gutters, PVC, just forget about them. Just don't even do it. If you've got some ground, put them in the ground. If you don't have any ground, make a raised bed. All right, finally off the strawberries, sorry. Let's talk about the Amelanchers, the Serviceberry. They are really nice tree, a flowering tree that can be very pretty. The picture down here is Autumn Brilliance, which has been bred for aesthetic value, not for berries. But here are some black raspberries and serviceberry, so you can tell they're coming in about the same time. I will tell you, just anecdotally, we were at the Des Moines Botanic Garden in early June this year, and a serviceberry was near the path, and I just grabbed one and stuck it in my mouth. And my daughter behind me, she said, "What are you eating?" And I said, "Well, it's a serviceberry." And she took a bite and she said, "That is the best fruit I've ever eaten." And she wants me to grow a tree. And I said, "I've got one already." so it's just kind of funny, but she really enjoyed it. They are a very nice berry. Birds will get them before you will. So just plant a bunch of them, and that way you'll get a little bit. I don't think it really matters what species you get. You're going to have berries no matter what. I did see a reference at Cornell that actually talked about the fruit qualities, and these are the ones the Shannon, Indian, Smoky, all that, those are the ones that were recommended by Cornell. So you can use that or not. I have a straight species of the Allegheny, and it bears, but I'm sure that the birds get most of them. Let's move on to probably my favorite fruit, which is black raspberries. I hope I'll talk some of you into planting these, even though, it may overlap with some of the other fruits. So if you don't like them, by all means, don't plant them, but I think you'll really enjoy them. They are usually that window in June. Again, to keep yourself in black raspberries, try to have more than one variety. I have one variety, that's my problem. I have Jewel. I love Jewel. It produces very well, but try the early and the later one too, and that way you'll have them for a longer period of time. They can get pretty, they travel. It says they grow from the crown, but as you know, of any bramble, when it comes up and that cane goes over, that tip's gonna root, and then you got a whole nother plant and you have a huge patch before you know it. So just kind of keep that in mind. And gooseberries, I don't know a whole lot about gooseberries, except they're thorny, and I don't like that at all. Any fruit I have here is not going to have thorns, because I've run good shirts that way. But they are thorny. Keep that in mind. They're a small little shrub. There's some really interesting colors, and even a thornless variety, which I don't know much about at all. But I do know that if you do have any interest in gooseberries, you need to probably go to a KSU Third Thursday thing. They used to have a section or part of the time that you could go and take a look at their gooseberries. And it was always interesting just to go see them, because I really just didn't know a whole lot about them. But we can grow them here, and they do fit in a window of opportunity. So there you go. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about blueberries, since they can have a fairly long harvest season, and there's not going to be any kind of epiphany or anything on blueberries. If you don't have them and you're thinking about planting them, you really need to do some work prior to planting them. These plants will outlive you if you have everything right. They will outlive you. And most of the roots are going to be right near that crown, and we really like to plant those on a raised bed, and that way the drainage is good, and that way the weeding is going to be a little simpler. And I really hope you can't hear my dogs, but there they are. I'm sorry. We'll keep going. All right, so here's some of the varieties you probably need to consider for full season blueberries. So Patriot's our earliest one. And I will tell you, they're coming out with more. They're coming out with crosses. And so this is probably a 2-year-old presentation. I really haven't updated it. So there might be even some new ones out. But even container varieties, they have done a bunch of work on these container varieties. So this Friendship Top Hat, and then Stark Brothers has this whole series of varieties. Just, you can go crazy. And I encourage you to, because blueberries are extreme. Well, all fruit, in my mind, they're all nutritious and they're all very good. Lots of sugar. Humans like sugar. All right, so here's the things to be concerned about, and this is a very quick thing. You could talk for 2 hours about blueberries or more. So we'll just hit these highlights. The main thing to do is if you're gonna plant a blueberry, and you can do it this fall if you want, is to get your pH correct, and that's in that 4.5 to 5.0 range. So adjust that pH even before you order, because you cannot rush that. You have to get that right first. We also encourage you, when you do these raised beds, to actually incorporate peat into your raised bed. I know this seems like a lot of work, but it really does help with acidifying the soil. And if you've got crappy soil, then you've actually added some organic matter, and you're helping that. The picture here on the lower left is a plant that fruited. The people who had this fruited it way too early. With blueberries, usually you're talking about the 3rd year in the ground before you harvest anything. And when you do this to a blueberry, I don't even care if your pH is right. This is gonna really put that plant in a funk that it may not come out of for a while. So try not to fruit too early. 1 or 2 berries, sure, check them out, make sure they taste good. But to have this teeny tiny plant with all those fruit, no, don't do it. And then the upper right picture is about combating the birds, because they will find your blueberries just like the serviceberries. So you will have to have a plan to cage those, or some other means, whether it be firing those cannons or whatever. But you really need to keep that as part of your whole plan, because they'll clean you out. No questions asked. They're bad. I remember one time I called my blueberry grower to see how things were progressing, and on his answer machine he said, "There's not going to be any blueberries this year because the birds got them all." And that was it. So it's a real thing. All right, we're going on to raspberries. I'm going fast, I told you. Some people don't like raspberries. I like them. I think people have this connotation, especially these people who are think Kentucky is a southern state, which I sort of do and sort of don't. But this is not a southern thing to grow. Blackberries are the southern thing to grow. Raspberries are a northern thing, and sometimes it's just a matter of getting over yourself and planting something that you like. We can grow lots of raspberries. We can do the June bearing. We can do the the fall bearing, the Primocane fruiting. As you can see under there, there's purple. There's one called Royalty. I've grown it. It's fine, but I'd rather just have the red raspberry. It's just a novelty. It and the Royalty and the Ann, which is yellow. They're to me, they're just a novelty, and they really don't add anything to as far as taste. They don't taste. In fact, I think they taste a little bit worse. I like the red raspberries. So yeah, you've again got your early, mid, and late varieties. So certainly do that. And then of course these fall bearing ones, where the June bearing stop, the fall bearing take over and go till frost. I just planted Joan Jay. Again, I do not like thorns, so I planted Joan Jay earlier this year, and I had a cup of raspberries yesterday. So yeah, go for it. Heritage is very good too. That's what I've heard. And there's this picture of some of the fall raspberries. They all kind of look the same. So there you go. Let's talk about blackberries though. So blackberries, we can have a very, very long season with blackberries, just like our raspberries. They're broken down into these categories of erect versus semi-erect. And these are the ones that fruit on old canes from the year before. So the canes are they are biennial, they live 2 years and they die. But those on the right, the Primocane Thorny, Primocane Thornless. These are growing and forming, these fruit are forming on the new canes that come up this year. So just like the Joan Jay, that was a Primocane, I planted it this year, up came the canes, it fruited, and I got to enjoy them in 1 year. But these do the same way. They come up, there's not 2-year canes, just one, actually do, they will survive 2 years, but the main crop is going to be your Primocane crop. I'm not going to get into the Floricane crop at all, but you can get 2 crops out of these. Primark 45 and Black Magic are kind of the ones now, if you want to have that July till frost. It used to be Prime Jim and Prime Jan. I grew both of those. Yeah, I mean, they did okay for that time. But now they have the thornless ones. I did plant about 50 of the Primark Freedom. And I think this year I finally got rid of them just because they've been in the ground like 7 or 8 years. But they are excellent. I think I canned 100 things of jelly, half pints of jelly last year on it. Went a little crazy. That's on 50 plants. But I did, again, I'm getting rid of that patch, and I put in Traveler. I've also put in one called Vaughn, which is not on here. It's VON. And that's a new release from NC State. I've had a couple of them off this year. I just planted them earlier this year, and I've already gotten a couple off, and they taste really good. I hope they'll do just as good as the Freedom did. I'll talk a little bit about the erect and semi-erect. These are thornless as well for the most part. I think they all are. But again, it's all about trying to get a good mix so you can have blackberries for as long as possible. So here's some characteristics of the erect and semi-erect. The main thing to get off of this slide is that both of these types have fairly large seeds, which a lot of people do not like. And you have to think about spotted winged Drosophila, which is the SWD down there. Honestly, you know, I ate raspberries yesterday, I ate strawberries yesterday, and I don't think about it, but I'll get to that in the next slide or in a little bit. But semi-erect is the most productive. So if you really care about productivity and have a lot, if you do want to can or process them, I would say semi-erect is the way to go. And Triple Crown is still the best variety that anybody at UK talks about. That will probably change because everything does change. Let's talk more about these Primocane blackberries. I don't really want to talk about the thornies, but if you like the taste of these, go for it. Primark 45 is kind of the one right now that's in favor. It's a good berry. There's no doubt about it. It's a good berry. I just don't like them to be thorny. So, but it does have some good firmness. So it does have a little stand. Blackberries just don't last. Either do raspberries. You have to pretty much eat them or do something with them right away. This one has a little bit of firmness, so it might have a little more shelf life. And then I want to talk mainly about these Primocane thornless ones because I just think, why get stuck if you don't have to? And if you like the flavor, that's even a bonus. So I encourage you to try these. The Primark Freedom, I have a lot of experience with. Primark Traveler, I don't. But Primark Traveler is a little smaller than the Freedom Berry, but it should have better shelf life because it is a little bit firmer as well. I'm not going to talk about how to produce 2 crops because that'll take me a while. If you have a question at the end, I'll be happy to address it then. All right, so here's just a quick look at what they look like in comparison to the good old quarter as far as the size. The Freedom had pretty good size. I guess I'll be a little disappointed in Traveler, but I won't be because I like them anyway. So. All right, so let's talk about spotted winged Drosophila, because if you get grossed out easily, you want to be sure to monitor this. It's a new pest that came in 2012. It's this little fly that comes along and lays its eggs in perfectly good fruit. The eggs hatch, out come these little worms, and can really gross you out. If I had thought about that while I was eating my raspberries yesterday, I wouldn't have been able to eat them, but I just don't worry about it. I just pop them in my mouth and don't worry about it. I'm getting a little extra protein. If you want to check though, if you do have them, and usually these later crops will have them. Strawberries usually miss, they're early enough that they miss spotted wing Drosophila, but basically blueberries can get them. Probably not. I don't know about gooseberry. Gooseberry's got that really hard outer skin on it, so they may not be able to penetrate. But most of the other fruit we've been talking about, you're probably going to have spotted wing Drosophila in there. But this is a little test you can do to see if you have them. The lower left is really gross. This was like a pint of raspberries that had been left out overnight and not refrigerated. Next morning, that's what you got. And that will really make you think twice. But anyway, you can do this little test where they'll float out of the berries and you can monitor them that way. We do have ways to contend with them. The main thing is you keep the berries picked. Don't let them get overripe. And if you do have any overripe berries, you put them in a bag and lay them out in the hot sun and let them just fry, or you can freeze them. We do not throw these in the compost bin because our home compost bins generally do not get hot enough to kill these little suckers. So don't compost them. If you want to do things organically, the Protect is probably going to be the way to go. This again was a couple years ago, just doing some comparison on prices down there in the lower right. But Martin's Produce Supply is about a 15-minute, 20-minute drive from my house, and they've got probably the best deal on Protect. If you have some dealer in your county that, ask them to get some in, and they can even sell it by the foot, perhaps, so that would be helpful for small growers. So we do have some insecticides, and I'll just leave it at that. But if you want clean berries, this is the only way to go, either the Protect or the insecticides. Or you can be like me and just don't worry about it. Okay, so yields are all over the place for some of these things. And of course, varieties will give you much different yield as well. But there again is just some of the very much just average yield. Strawberries about a quart per foot of rows. That means you might have a plant and a half. Serviceberries, I had got no data on that whatsoever. And I'm not going to read these, but as you can tell, the Primocane Thornless blackberries are rather low yielding. So when I had 50 out, when I would go out to harvest, I would get maybe right in the mid-season, I might get three to 4 quarts, or I'm sorry, pints. Now I don't know which I use. I think it was pints for that 50. And so that's like every other day though. So you can have quite a bit of fruit coming in at one time, but it's only, compared to the semi-erect thornless blackberries like a Triple Crown, it's very little yield on that. But again, this is a talk about just keeping yourself in berries and having some fresh fruit all year long. And with the right selection of these plants, plus the right selection of these varieties within there, you can have berries from May easily until frost. And now that you're ready to buy some of these, if you go to the Center for Crop Diversification at the University of Kentucky website, they have an interactive map. Actually, if you go to CCD and you click on the left-hand side and say maps, you'll come up with this interactive place or interactive map that tells you what nurseries, greenhouses, whatever to buy these fruit from, and even down to the cultivar or the variety. So it's a very nice, newly updated, I might add, publication. And it's in publication form as well. If you click on that HortFact 3002 down there at the bottom. I think I'm about done. Yes, I am done. I'll be happy to entertain any questions. And as soon as I'm done, I'm gonna hit the road and go